Hey, it's me, your favorite little guy. I finally saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and just like the rest of the internet, well, at least the part of it that hasn't completely lost its mind, I must admit I was very skeptical about this movie. Don't get me wrong, I'm not someone who dislikes the Marvel movies. In fact, I'm not a weirdo who thinks that Marvel has been all bad recently. Yeah, there's been some stinkers, but I mean, come on, we've gotten some pretty decent ones out of the mountains of schlock the studio's been pumping out lately. Shang-Chi was pretty fun. Let's not pretend No Way Home wasn't like a Category 9 level earthquake that shattered the fucking world. Black Panther 2 was quite a surprise, and Guardians Volume 3 was the magnum opus Marvel needed. However, I understand that superhero movies are in a weird spot where they almost feel uninspired and a little too corporate. I don't think superhero fatigue will ever become a problem, but I can understand the burnout. There seems to be an oversaturation, and that can get tiresome. Which is why I was shocked that this is the only MCU movie to come out this year, and I think that's a smart move, which is something a lot of studios have been doing lately. Instead of filling out every month with a blockbuster, they've been streamlining their release dates, and oddly enough, this has allowed indie movies to do a lot better than they normally would. And I do think that Deadpool is a good palate cleanser, the definitive example of what a blockbuster should be. A fun, energetic movie that puts people in a good mood. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Deadpool movies, I was at least intrigued with what this new movie could bring to the MCU. It also helps that this is a return for Hugh Jackman, who's been retired from playing Wolverine for 7 years now. And I'm not gonna pretend like this didn't make me more interested to see the film. One thing about Deadpool that always bothers me is his standalone stories, and whenever they choose to focus solely on him. I've never really been the biggest fan of his humor, and overall I think his shtick can get a little old. He works better with a straight man to bounce off of, and having Wolverine be said straight man is a good idea. If you haven't read Uncanny X-Force, go read it and you'll see what I mean. And of course, there's been a lot of talk and discussion surrounding this movie and what it could be about, which of course built anticipation for a lot of people. So after seeing it, I can definitely say, it's fine. It's a perfectly average movie. Now, despite what Twitter would have you believe, people are capable of turning their brains off and having fun, myself included. But for some reason, there's a vocal minority of people who think I'm not a real fan because I have some critiques about the film. Are we seriously still doing this same naive, delusional bullshit? This movie is not a masterpiece. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a great movie, but that's okay. This movie had one job and it did it well. I like that this movie can be watched with little to no thought put into it. It's fun, bombastic, energetic. It can be funny sometimes, and it's just so cozy. It's not trying to be the best movie ever made, and I don't need it to be. It's fucking Deadpool. Sure, it would have been nice to have a fun movie and a good one wrapped in a neat little bow, but the fact of the matter is a lot of blockbusters just aren't built that way. I've been feeling kinda low lately, and despite hitting a milestone on my channel, there's still periods of time where I just feel kinda You know what I mean? So this is a good example of a movie that'll put you in a good mood. It'll make you want to forget your problems for a little bit. Now, to actually talk about the movie, because I don't want to keep rambling on about online bullshit, Deadpool and Wolverine is about Deadpool and Wolverine. After being taken by the TVA, Wade and Logan team up in order to save themselves and the multiverse. So yeah, this movie's plot is kinda basic, which is pretty much how all the Deadpool movies have operated. They managed to deliver a very simple story and sprinkle in some jokes and action. However, this movie probably has the most forgettable narrative in the whole trilogy. It's cool seeing this film be a love letter and a farewell to the Fox X-Men universe, but it's not exactly the most memorable narrative. Beyond being simplistic, everything that takes place in this narrative is almost a little too predictable at times. The villain is also really fucking one note, which again, is fine. She serves as an antagonist that only exists for us to see these dudes duke it out with the bad guy, but there's a part of me that wishes this movie did a little more in making me care. Now, just so you don't think I hate this movie, I will admit Ryan Reynolds is really good at playing this character. There will be no arguments from me on that. And I'll say that it was nice seeing Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. The way they address the events of Logan is done pretty well, and I'm glad this movie didn't fuck with the continuity of that film. This is a much different portrayal of Wolverine, one that feels way more cynical and hopeless, but still the same hot-headed old man we all fell in love with. And his banter with Ryan Reynolds is really good. In particular, there's a scene that involves them in a car that was pretty intense while also being pretty hilarious. Like, yeah, go figure, the characters this movie is named after have good chemistry. Also, one trend this movie continues in the Deadpool movies are the action scenes are really fucking sick. Most of them are directed pretty decently, I guess, but the eventual fight we get between Deadpool and Wolverine was pretty sick. And yeah, the usual Deadpool humor is here and your mileage may vary, but I didn't really find this movie that funny. I know that humor is subjective, but I'm not really into overly edgy, try-hard humor. And before you say I'm a contrarian, I'll say that I didn't even find the previous Deadpools that funny either. When Deadpool is talking, he's kind of unbearable, but like I said before, Wolverine is the perfect straight man for Deadpool's humor to bounce off of. Plus, it came off as two frenemies bickering and it just worked for me. I don't know, like I said, your mileage may vary on this one. However, when it comes to the meta jokes, it kind of annoyed me. Whenever there's a fourth wall break or a joke about things from the real world, it kind of comes off as a big wink to the audience, which I get is the point of meta jokes, but I never really found them that funny. There were some cute ones, but I'm of the opinion that meta jokes only work once and they lose their footing after you've seen them many times. Especially the ones that make fun of the multiverse era of Marvel. And sure, it is funny how they got away with making fun of the mediocre state of Marvel, but this movie is still about the fucking multiverse. I don't know, maybe I'm being too mean, but some of the jokes didn't really work for me. And of course, without getting into spoilers, there are some cameos here, and they range from okay to pretty fucking cool. There's one that had me so flabbergasted that I'm surprised they even got the actor to be in this movie. Now that being said, there's still a few more things in this movie that I wish could have been reworked. For one thing, this movie is written by like 5 people and it definitely shows. This movie is paced in a really weird way, and that's not to say I was bored, but it does feel like this movie loses its footing a little bit, and there's just a little too much jumping around. Now this is a personal thing, but I really hate when a movie starts in a specific place in the story that isn't the beginning. I'm of the opinion that a movie should just be laid out chronologically, and the beginning of this movie starts at a specific point in the story, and we have to watch it play catch up with itself to get back to said moment. It's not as messy as the first Deadpool movie, but it's still worth pointing out. Side note, it is a really cool scene. Don't think I'm being a cynical asshole just for the sake of being one. And speaking of set cameos, a lot of them come up at a very weird time, which felt like whoever wrote the scenes forgot this was a send-off to the Fox X-Men universe, and said, fuck it, put so-and-so in the scene. I'm not immune to ape-brain entertainment, but this movie felt like it was trying to be a No Way Home level movie, which in some ways it is. But I feel like this movie could have used some rewrites and maybe streamlined the pacing. And again, the villain is probably one of the most forgettable ones I've seen from the Deadpool movies, and this is the same series that has this fucking guy in it. She's just another bad guy that wants to do bad things and be a problem for our heroes to solve. I know it sounds like I'm being too mean, and I recognize that most of the shit that happens in this movie is just an excuse to have these two characters team up and bring the X-Men to the MCU. Like I said, I'm not immune to ape-brain entertainment, but there's a part of me that wishes this movie was a little more congruent. Admittedly, it's a little selfish of me to want a movie that doesn't feel like a roller coaster, but that is the appeal of comic book movies. So I'm not mad at this movie for just being okay. This is not a bad movie. If anything, it's one of the better movies to come out of the MCU. But just like the previous Deadpool movies, I had fun in the moment, and I'll probably never watch this movie again anytime soon. It was a momentary distraction for a couple hours, and it was nice seeing these characters on the big screen together. And just to throw in some nice things to say, I appreciate that this movie was a nice send-off to Fox, and throughout all the highs and lows, it reminded me that for 20 years, I had fun with this universe. Throughout their greatest hits and low-tier garbage, I and many others were a part of this experience. This is where I tip my hat and say farewell to the Fox X-Men universe and welcome them to the MCU. Don't fuck this up, Disney. I mean it. So I'm gonna give Deadpool and Wolverine a 6.5 out of 10.